Cool. So we're recording the session. Yeah, what we'll do is this week we won't just be doing the analysis, but what I did was I kept the analysis the way we left it last week. So we'll also just accommodate and adjust, delete whatever's not necessary. Then obviously just accommodate for the new price action that we've got. So let's get started with AC. So on AC, we've got a position, or we just entered a position today. Since we entered, or ever since we entered, we've been at break even literally the whole entire day. Let's delete this. Cool. So all we're going to be doing is just basically running over what our narrative is, why we're in the position, and we leave it at that. Otherwise, coming up with any new analysis that's going to contradict the decision that we made now won't be very much helpful to us. So we'll stay away from that. But looking at the overall analysis, what we have is higher time frame, we've got momentum, then we've got a corrective structure. Naturally, we're looking for the next momentum out of this corrective structure. We've got momentum that managed to break a level of resistance, and as well as our extreme high over here. Obviously, the last source of sellers that had managed to break some level of support. We managed to give a new higher high with this momentum. So naturally, so what we're doing is we're just trying to trade in the direction of this momentum, hoping that first of all, we fulfill this 90% rule, and then obviously the 90% rule of our high time corrective structure. And that's our overall high time frame narrative. Very much nice and simple. Simple. If we just look at the structure here, most recent structure, cool. We spoke about this impulsive move to the upside. In this impulsive move, we've got resistance there. We've got support over there. And then obviously the move continues over here. And then obviously that's why we're looking at this support as a nice support. In the support, obviously, we've got price action reacting over here as well, this horizontal support. So naturally, so we're looking at price maybe manipulating below those two lows, then obviously maybe breaking back above structure. What we also do have is, yes, we've got price action not so much being all that impulsive to the upside, but at the same time, we do have that corrective structure also moving to the downside. So coinciding with whatever long bias we might have, we've got at least a little bit of nature that confirms that yes, price is selling, creating lower lows and lower highs, but we're doing so in a corrective manner. And if we wanted to confirm our English and just make sure that our lows are being broken in a corrective manner, we just look left and we'll see our lows, some of them are being broken in a corrective manner. But nonetheless, let's just come to our most recent price action here in the 4 hours. So basically what we had marked out is just this momentum shift over there, obviously source of buyers that gives us an area where we want to trade. Another source of momentum shift is over there. So obviously what we had last week, I think we took a buy from inside of here, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere inside of here as a day trade. And obviously if the day trade failed, we were looking for the overall buy for the swing. So nonetheless, we did get a nice swing over here, or at least we're in the swing now. All we've got to do is just exercise patience and obviously just wait for the overall trade to play out. We do still see that we still have maybe a third touch that's open over there, whatever the case is. But the criteria that we've been looking for has eventually fulfilled, or at least presented itself to us. And we're going to pull the trigger when it's time to pull the trigger. So all we're doing right now is we're just exercising patience. We're not looking for the entire move to break the 90% rule all the way to the upside, all the way to here. We're not looking for this overall move right till up there. But what we're looking for is just we're going to be conservative. Obviously, why we're trying to be conservative is because price is not really, I guess, at an area where there's multiple confluences. It would have been nice if we had this horizontal level of structure that aligned maybe with our trend lines or whatever. So there's not a lot of confluence that's going on there in this area for us. So all we're going to do is just try and get the risk to reward ratio that makes sense for us, obviously taking this risk. And if you guys can see here, we've got a 1:11, 11.4. This is enough RR for me to say, okay, cool, I've taken a risk and I'm willing to get, or at least the reward looks sweet enough to me. Otherwise, if this fails, we'll wait for a move a little bit lower. Not expecting it to fail. Obviously, the criteria was presented to itself, but nonetheless, no one moves the markets, not we, not anyone. So we obviously just exercise patience and wait for the move to follow through. Yeah, so I think in terms of our, let me speak about our watch list there, because I think I didn't mention anything about our watch list. In terms of the overall watch list that we've got going on here, we're gonna still focus on the same pairs that we were focusing on last week, but maybe we'll just look at these other pairs that don't have any flags on them, just to see if there is anything that maybe we need to update and accommodate for, if maybe the probabilities have changed for us. So let's go on to some AJ. Ooh, AJ already just looks boring. So AJ, I don't think anything's changed much for me besides the fact that we're still at the support. break and a retest, I still wouldn't be willing to be a buyer in this market here. We saw a lot of sellers coming into the market and prices kind of moving sideways. So in terms of what's going on here, I think the zones still stand is that maybe we can use these two areas here for a sell, looking obviously to sell in the direction of this momentum here that managed to break structure. So if we look at the overall structure, we've been trending down. Obviously, this was our last resistance, then our last support. We saw a corrective structure. And after this corrective structure, the last momentum obviously we see is this momentum over here. So what I would still like to try and do is still like to try and trade in the direction of this new momentum that we just saw, at least the most recent daily momentum that we just saw breaking structure. And until maybe we tap into these zones here, let's just exercise patience and see what develops for us. But on AJ, there's still pretty much nothing for me. Let's just go to AU to look at some interesting pairs rather. So AU's playing out very nicely, I guess. As much as maybe we're not in the sell, we don't see probabilities on the downside of things. But what we do see is our overall thought processes playing out, showing that at least we've got some level of understanding of what's going on here. And we will be able to formulate a bias at a future point in time if price keeps on playing our tune, if price keeps on doing what we're expecting price action to do. So nonetheless, higher time frame structure, or at least higher time frame analysis, looks very much similar to AUDCAD in a sense that we've got momentum, we've got a corrective structure, and we're expecting momentum to terminate maybe at the 90% rule if we do break this overall corrective structure. Back to the most recent price action, all we've been speaking about in this most recent price action was that we assume that this is a manipulation outside of the structure and that we've broken back into the structure. And as long as we're inside of the structure, we can still hold a bullish bias. We can still see buyers taking control of this market. What we also do see is in this last momentum to the downside, this is the last sign of sellers that managed to break a level of structure. Obviously, we can see buyers completely reversing the move and even breaking above this high, giving us a new higher high. Naturally so, we're looking for some sort of an inverse looking structure obviously to play out. We don't know how it's going to look, but obviously that's kind of what we're trying to trade once, or if we do get this inverse looking structure, then that's kind of what we're hoping to trade with our overall bullish bias. But nonetheless, let's just come to the 4 hour and look at the most recent price action, see what's cooking here, and then obviously create a plan for this week. I almost said next week. I'm used to doing these on the weekends. Okay, cool. So looking at the overall structure, I guess what's important for us to maybe mention was this nonsense that was cooking over here. All this nonsense started over here, so that's why this is an important support for us. You guys can see now we've got obviously a set of somewhat equal lows, but price action did break obviously below this low and give us a new lower low. But we do have somewhat equal lows. What we were looking at is obviously because we had this last 4 hour move to the downside and we had corrections, obviously corrective structure inside. Obviously, we treated this as a range, this being the high of the range, this being the low of the range. And obviously, we can't look for buys at the high of the range. That's where we were. We also weren't interested in selling because of the probabilities and where we are higher time frame. We didn't see the RR to the downside. Nonetheless, we see market breaking down, playing to our tune. All we're waiting for is for price action to break below these equal lows. Obviously, we've got our high probability area being this POI over there where we see a momentum shift. But anything that does give us a reason to buy, some sort of a reversal structure, if I see a double bottom forming inside of this structure, won't I change my bias, or won't this new chart pattern that develops change the probabilities, give me a new area of probabilities, or increase the probabilities in some sort of way, or whatever the case is, it's going to happen. So obviously, we've got a bias, a bullish bias on this pair. We're waiting for things to play out, but how this pair does decide to play out, obviously that will change the probabilities that are there for us in this market. So if we do see some sort of a reversal structure that happens after we break these lows, we don't have to come to this POI. If we've got a reversal structure that then obviously creates maybe new POIs for us, then we've got new probabilities to be able to still trade this structure safely. So otherwise on AU, I didn't add, I'm not going to change anything from last week. Everything still looks pretty much the same. Still didn't add a resistance trend line, but now we can be safe to add a resistance trend line because price has actually broken some sort of a support in our direction. So now we can be chacharach and add this resistance trend line and assume that this is a swing high. Before price action broke any low, it was just an assumption. Now we can set our assumptions aside and confirm that yes, this is a swing high that has formed because we've broken structure. So now we've got this descending structure. Obviously, we can see the descending structure play out with the third touch, whatever the case is. But as long as we're inside of the descending structure, we still have probabilities to buy, and this is still a seller's market. Let's move on to the next pair. I see something in the chat there. T.Mayne, what was the 90% rule that you're talking about? If I may ask, I'm new to trading. So 90% rule is fairly simple. Basically, 90% rule is, I don't know whose assumption it is. Maybe I should look into it, but it's someone's assumption that 90% of the time price will come to obviously where the corrector. Okay, let me just draw a new structure. If there's an impulse and there's a correction that starts to form over here, 90% of the time price will meet the objective of coming to close or at least terminating where this corrective structure started. That's basically the 90% rule in a nutshell. Still has 10%. So obviously 10% of the time we don't actually achieve the objective. But yeah, that's the 90% rule. That 90% of the time we could see price meeting the objective of the corrective structure, or at least where the objective corrective structure started. Let's go on to some New Zealand dollar CAD. So New Zealand dollar CAD is also one pair that we're not going to be too hoo-ha over, as much as we've got some POIs that are being tapped. But these POIs, okay, will adjust and accommodate for the new price action. Nonetheless, on New Zealand dollar CAD, we are trying to be biased, right? We're trying so hard to be biased because our hearts are also that we've been forecasting this move over here for the longest of time. And me, I didn't even catch one pip, not a singular pip of this entire move to the upside for the longest of time. So our hearts are sore, we're a little bit salty. We're trying to involve ourselves in those buys, right? At least we're aware about it, even if that's the truth, or even if we're joking, at least we've got some level of awareness about it. There's some people that trade and they have no level of awareness about the fact that maybe they're trying to get into a buy because they're just a little bit salty, or whatever the case is. If we've got some level of awareness, we'll be able to deal with it or recognize it when it comes. But nonetheless, I am just joking. I'm not salty about it. Maybe I was, but just is what it is. New Zealand dollar CAD, what we've got is we had this overall corrective price action to the downside, right? So nonetheless, let's just look at the most recent price action. We've got momentum. We want to trade in the direction of the momentum. We see lows being broken below, broken back above. So obviously we have signs of corrective price action. So nonetheless, we're looking for some, or at least we're looking for some sort of a corrective structure to form inside of there to give us some probabilities to trade long. What we can also say that we have is we've got this last resistance area that was broken above that maybe we can be looking for some sort of a retest of. So it would be helpful for us to find some sort of a momentum shift in and around this area when we drop down to a 4 hour. But then at the same time, we're looking at this low over here, and obviously, damn, way too low. We're looking at this low over here, and obviously we can expect some sort of an inverse or some sort of a something to create, or this is a level of structure at least where this corrective structure started. So nonetheless, that's why we've been looking at this level of structure, trying to catch trades to the upside over here. I don't know if you guys were part of us missing, or I think, what did we do? I don't remember what we did, but we did something stupid. I think it was here where I think that my update for the signal was that the momentum wasn't coming in at that hour. And I think we're closing out at -5 pips. I think we're -5 pips or something. And after we closed out on that trade, more saltiness. But it's fine. We just live and let die. What I want to do, I do want to delete this POI over here because someone will just go and decide to just start buying right now. And we already do have risk on AUDCAD, so there's no point in us increasing the risk and trading both NZD-CAD and AUDCAD. But otherwise, we're talking about New Zealand dollar CAD. So looking at just the most recent structure here on a daily, obviously we're looking at a corrective structure. We're trying to find areas where we will find, or at least we'll be able to try and find trading opportunities. What we do have is we've got the last move that managed to break a level of structure, which on a daily is this move over here. So obviously this is the high of my range, this is the low of my range, and if I'm looking for buying opportunities, I look for buys at some sort of a support. So what I'm going to be doing is the closer I get to the support, the more I'm looking for bullish buys, trading opportunities, obviously because it is a level of support. We will obviously see what other detail we have on a smaller time frame, but obviously we're just making sense of what's going on here. Okay, nice. You. The chop here on this pair is absolutely nasty. She's so nasty. What I'm just trying to do is I'm just trying to look for a POI inside of here that aligns with that resistance that we marked out there. And I don't see any. Let me just open up the chart so I can see the candlesticks. Nothing. I don't see any other momentum shift inside of here that we can use. This is the only one and it's already marked out. So there's nothing that we can do in terms of momentum shifts, but obviously we can discuss the structure and make a contingency for the price action. So just looking at the most recent price action, we can see a lot of nastiness, a lot of nastiness. But the most recent nastiness, obviously, we're trending to the downside. We're making lower lows and lower highs. This is our extreme high over here. What we can do is we can try and isolate a corrective structure because this is corrective price action. Every low that we broke there, we broke below that low and we broke back above that low. So otherwise, we know that we're in a corrective structure. We're trying to isolate what type of corrective structure this is. And then obviously we're trying to find where the probabilities lie for us. So what I can do, or at least what we all can do, is try and isolate this corrective structure here. We've got a first touch, second touch. Let's exercise patience, see what happens at this potential third touch over there. I know I do have a POI here. I think it's on a 1 hour. I think I got this POI on a 1 hour, but I do have a POI there, obviously planned for the contingency, at least a plan to buy. If obviously AUDCAD fails, then New Zealand dollar CAD will still come through fast with a trading opportunity. But nonetheless, yes, let's exercise patience, wait for price action to come down to the support over here. This is our last area of demand that managed to break a level of structure. Obviously, this demand over here, we can't trade this demand anymore because we already tapped into this demand there. And price action is literally at the same demand right now. So unless there's a risk entry that presents itself, we already got risk on AUDCAD. So there's no point in taking double the risk on something that is to some degree positively correlated. So what we'll do, let's exercise patience, wait to see if there's a trading opportunity at the support. Otherwise, if there is no trading opportunity at the support, let's wait and see what price action does if we do break below. We can do anything, I have no idea, but the only plan I have for AUDCAD is to trade at the support. If this doesn't come, then we'll just wait and see how we adjust with the price action. For now, there's nothing that we can use here on our left-hand side to increase probabilities anywhere below this low. The only thing that will increase probabilities below this low is if we see some sort of a chart pattern forming inside of here. That's the only thing. Otherwise, let's go on to the next pair. Let me check the chat there. Always no stress, Samuel. I see you're just saying thank you, man. No stress, man. Cool. So New Zealand dollar yen looks very similar to AJ in a sense of that there's just confusion, mega confusion. But except is that with New Zealand dollar yen, the confusion is a little bit more obvious than on AJ. If we just look at where this high started and where this low has been created, we can see that price action has been fairly inside of that high and inside of that low. Yes, we were creating higher highs and whatever. There was momentum. There was a corrective structure. There was more momentum. But we can see that everything is still basically inside of this range. And the more we're dragging on inside of this range, the less the momentum is becoming clear. Why? Because this is a deceleration. This is price decelerating, and this is new momentum. We're at some sort of a support. So things are becoming a little bit confusing. I guess it's all 50-50 because we're stuck inside of a range. We're heading towards the middle of the range. I don't like 50-50. I like 51-49 in my favor with the 51. That's a perfect environment for me. So as long as things are still like this, we'll just move on from New Zealand dollar yen. There's not much that we can do to waste our time with there. Let's look at our US30. Yeah, so US30, very interesting. So one thing before we get into the US30 and NASDAQ, guys, we're going back to our original contingency. If you guys remember what our first contingencies were with US30 and NASDAQ, was we had a contingency to obviously look for selling positions on one of them and buying positions on the other. I'm going back to that with me looking primarily for sells on US30 and primarily for buys on NASDAQ. So if the world crashes and burns, or if we're still in confusion, obviously we look to buy NASDAQ, we look to sell US30. But at the same time, we will forever be trading the structures that we see. We'll never enforce our bias or whatever. We always, at the end of the day, trade what we see, not what we think and what we feel. So nonetheless, on US30, let's just stick to the most recent price action because I think in this case, it's going to be the most relevant. Aside from the fact that maybe we can draw to a conclusion that we're moving sideways in between. Ever since all of this chop, I don't know who this buyer was. We'll never know who this buyer was, but this buyer started something, this seller started something, and ever since this buyer and this seller came in, we've been stuck inside, showing obviously chop, a little bit of momentum in some directions, but nonetheless, we reacted from this support, showing that this buyer is still in the market. Obviously, this buyer was even able to break some resistance and give us a new higher high. So clearly, we're in the middle of a range. It's a seller's market and a buyer's market. Doesn't matter which direction you trade, you'll find probabilities in both directions. So nonetheless, what I'm going to be doing is just looking at the most recent price action here, just seeing where we are in terms of context. And then obviously we formulate a bias based off that. Yeah. So we were descending. Obviously, we broke with nice momentum, but look at where we are. We're at some sort of a resistance. It makes more sense for me to be looking for sells at a resistance rather than to buy into a resistance. Unless maybe I find a break and retest of some sort, then yeah, the probabilities change. But for now, obviously, there is none. What we do see is that also there's some sort of a potential, or I think we spoke about this last week, a potential for some sort of an inverse where we've got this support, obviously this last resistance. This is our last move to manage to break a level of structure. Obviously, we see a complete reversal of all these sellers, even managing to make a new higher high. So if price does come down, obviously to this level of structure that we've broken below and broken back above, we can find a trading opportunity to continue in the direction of this new momentum that managed to break a level of structure. So there is a plan, obviously, to buy in accordance with higher time frame structure, and in same direction of this most recent momentum. But obviously, look at where we are right now. We're at resistance. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to formulate my plan off that, taking into account this structure, this weird structure that's happening right now. What I want to do is I want to isolate my areas of probability and I want to be safe. Yes, I did have a POI inside of here, but price smashed straight through, did react from, but did not respect the POI. Nonetheless, let's just isolate whatever structure we've got going on there. You guys can see we've got some weird looking, I don't know, sideways moving structure, but it is some sort of a range happening inside of, obviously, this is the last place where we see evidence of sellers. The sellers stopped there. So this is our extreme high, our extreme low. The closer we get to extreme high, the more we want to be buyers. The closer sellers, the closer we get to extreme low, the more we want to be buyers. So what I'm going to do, exercise patience. Obviously, this trade is, I think, a little bit too dangerous for us to take now. Usually I find my trading opportunities in the morning. I don't think I'm very active in entering after 5 and whatever the case is. By that time, New York traders that are making the biggest decisions have probably already made their decisions, and they're about to go on lunch in a couple of hours. My own assumptions, because I don't know their time zone, but my own assumptions, they're about to go and lunch in a couple of hours, and after lunch, there's no important decisions that are being made after lunch. So I like to trade in the beginning of New York session, end of London session, and obviously throughout London session, basically throughout London session. When London session is done, then I should be done as well, trying to find entries. So maybe what we can do is, obviously we'll see what price action does around this resistance. Obviously, if we went down on a smaller time frame, you'd see the setup that I'm talking about here. But let's exercise patience, see a contingency for some sort of a third touch. This third touch will obviously bring us closer towards a resistance area, the most recent resistance, where we see strong evidence of sellers coming into the market, and our probabilities do increase for a sell from that area over there. For a buy, on the other hand, I don't think I'm safe. I don't think I feel safe buying anywhere inside of this corrective structure here. I do feel safe buying below this low over here. So if price action does manage to push lower, then come below this low, then we'll see what price action presents to us and if we can find a buy. But there are thousands of momentum shifts for us to try and find buying opportunities using if price does push lower. Where we are right now, we're at that resistance, and it does not make sense for me. With all my logic and reasoning, it doesn't make sense for me to buy into a resistance. It makes a lot more sense for me to be a seller. So with that in mind, I'm looking to sell US30, at least right now, where we are right now. I'm only going to try and find plans to sell US30. Buying US30 will buy if price moves a little bit lower. Let's move on to NASDAQ. Coolio. So NASDAQ is one pair that I will open myself up to buying. The reason why we'll open ourselves up to buying here on NASDAQ is because we've got a proper, yes, the structure looks very much similar to US30, aside from the fact that we've got this momentum, we've got what someone can assume is a corrective structure, and then we've got more momentum breaking the corrective structure. We've got this high of the corrective structure, price reacted from there. We've got new momentum breaking the corrective structure. And so far, it's just a proper break and a retest trade. It's not like we're buying into a resistance, because the other resistance that we have is very far up here. And this is a higher time frame resistance that we spoke about last week. Do we need to go into it? Maybe, for anyone that wasn't here last week. The reason why we're looking at this resistance and expecting to try and sell from that resistance is because this is the last resistance on a higher time frame that managed to break a level of structure. That's the last time we see evidence of sellers on a higher time frame. And as long as we're inside of this high and inside of this low, on whatever time frame this move was formed, this is still a seller's market, no matter what happens inside of here. Yes, we can still find chart patterns and whatever's to increase probabilities in different directions. But if we take into account what's happening on the time frames, every time frame there's a different objective that's happening. And obviously we just need to be aware of what's going on. That does not mean that everything should affect our biases based off no. We are very specific about what we do. Daily gives us a directional bias. 4 hour gives us points of interest. And obviously, if we're going to swing using the same structure, 1 hour will give us entry criteria. If we're going to swing, or if we're going to day trade and scalp, then obviously we'll switch it down a gear, and we'll use the 4 hour for our directional biases, the 1 hour for our points of interest, and the 15-minute, the 5-minute, and the 1 minute for our entry criteria. Everything is set in stone. We don't take things that are not relevant for a specific time frame. For example, there'll never be a time where I'm on the daily chart looking for an area to trade at. The daily chart is solely for points of interest. And as long as I'm always able to separate my information that I'm looking at on these different time frames, I'll never have conflicting information now. Well, number one, I'll always be guaranteed that I'm doing things the exact same way every single time to obviously get more consistent results. Doesn't matter whether those consistent results are negative or are positive. Fact that I'm developing, or at least I can say introducing consistency into my life or into my processes, already I'll be able to follow through, I'll be able to change, I'll be able to adapt, and I'll have the discipline of being consistent, because it doesn't matter how good your strategy is if you're not going to follow it at the end of the day. So nonetheless, let's just delete all of this stuff. I don't know why we digressed so far. Cool. So we've deleted all of that stuff. So on NASDAQ, obviously, we already discussed all of this stuff that's going on here, most recent price action. If we were to extend this trend line over here, you guys would see that, yes, we did break this, I guess, this overall descending structure. But for me, this would be a very corrective break of structure, because we managed to break and close below structure. Someone is there that can argue if we broke and close back above the structure. But for me, if there's confusion, if there's whatever, rather just take it what it is and not assume that there's solid information that I can make an accurate decision based off. I'll take it as we broke out of the structure, we broke back into the structure. So it's showing me a corrective break in structure. Now that I know that there's a corrective break in structure, I'm looking for a corrective, or at least for corrective price action in this area over here. If I were to just take what's handed to me on my chart, maybe even go down to a 1 hour, just so that we make this move a little bit more clear and why we're using this area. Let's do this. Cool. We've got some nice juicy momentum that started from this area here. So I'd rather use this as my support or as my low. And obviously we just accommodate for whatever new lows we have there. And we've got some sort of a corrective structure. Same thing here. We've got this, obviously this swing high here is just our assumption. This swing high has not been confirmed because we have not broken a level of structure as yet. But nonetheless, let's just assume that's a swing high. We put our resistance trend line, but we are planning contingencies for buying opportunities. And obviously, if you're planning a contingency for a buying opportunity, all we're doing is waiting for price action to come down towards a third touch in structure. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come down on a smaller time frame and look into, okay, let me show you guys, maybe before we end the session, because I know this is the second to last pair. Let me be a little bit, I don't know what, exposing, open, whatever the word is. how do I find important POIs on smaller time frames? What am I doing when I'm trying to look for a POI that's important to me on a smaller time frame? Because the lower the time frames we go, obviously, the more things we're going to find. We're going to find more and more and more and more and more POIs. What I like to do is I like to start on a higher time frame. Obviously, on a higher time frame, which is the 4 hour, we've got this POI over here. We can see price already tapped that POI. So we need to be looking for a POI that's a little bit lower than this POI over here. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to 1 hour and see, do I have any momentum shifts on a 1 hour that I can use below this? Remember, I just have this here just so that we can keep our eyes on the same thing. Do I have any momentum shifts inside of here? Not really. I don't really have any momentum shifts on a 1 hour. So obviously we drop down onto a 15. On a 15, what we're going to do is we're going to do the exact same thing.
Let me tell them. I'm the other trader. Okay. All right, guys. I
I
hope you're good, guys. About. It's your boy over here. So yeah, I was also in the US30 sale today. Looking at this, what's popping? I mean the US Tech. US Tech was popping, guys.
Man, we don't have a lot of time left.
Oh, okay, sorry, guys. To be done. I'll post my video, okay? Thanks, Bloods.
Oh damn. Is Kuri in the building, guys? Is the other trader deciding? He's deciding to be a ghost. I don't know for how long, but anyway, we'll give him his time. We'll give him his time. Yeah, so all we're doing is we're dropping down the time frames and we're basically looking for other POIs. Now, what I want to say is as we're dropping down the time frames, the reason why we started on a higher time frame to look for those POIs is because the higher the time frame we're looking at, the more valid the information. If I'm going to find that exact same POI or a POI on a smaller time frame, I should be less likely to try and strike it rich, become a millionaire, scale into all those funny things, because that point of interest is not obvious on a higher time frame. Remember that at any point in time, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to trade in the direction of higher time frame volume. So otherwise, if we drop here, or at least if we drop down on a 15-minute, look for any nice momentum shifts. I find one over here. We see a nice big bullish engulfing over here. This is the next momentum shift, obviously below the one that has, or where price has already tapped. So that, long story short, if I'm trying to look for longs, or at least if I'm trying to find a lot of confluence on NASDAQ for a long, the only POI that I can use is a 15-minute POI, and that 15-minute POI is way down here, inside of there. So obviously we're exercising patience to try and look for that buying opportunity. But in terms of sells, like we did say, we're going to use US30 obviously for our contingency for sells. We use NASDAQ for our contingency for buys. If price follows through like they lied to us and told us indices are long-term bullish, then obviously we'll get those buys on NASDAQ. If the world is crashing and burning, then we'll get those sells on US30. Otherwise, let's look at the last pair and then we'll call it a session. SUSIEN. So what we're going to be doing on SUSIEN is we're just going to accommodate for the new price action. We're not going to change anything about our analysis. All we're doing is just deleting a POI that obviously we can see price completely blew through today. So if we're just going to explain what we were looking for, what we are still looking for here on SUSIEN, basically we've got a downtrend, right? Higher time frame, we've got some sort of a downtrend. We've got new momentum. We've got a corrective structure. We've got more momentum breaking out of that corrective structure. So all we're trying to do is trade in the direction of this most recent momentum. Here's our extreme high of that momentum. Here's our extreme low of this new momentum that managed to break a couple of levels of structure inside of there. And obviously the closer we get to the extreme high, the more we look for sells. The closer we are at the extreme low, the more we're looking for our buying opportunities. So all I'm going to do is as we drop down onto a 4 hour, we try and isolate any corrective structure. Yes, I'm aware that this is not corrective nature because we broke above this. This is a beautiful break and a retest. I'm 100% aware that this uptrend over here is very much impulsive in terms of our rules. But if I compare just a simple thing to ask myself, if I'm seeing, okay, this looks impulsive to me, according to my rules, this is also impulsive. Which side am I trading? Which side do I align myself? Which side is the momentum? There's a simple calculator or a rule thing over here. How long did it take for price to move from that high to this low? You guys can see it took 5 days over 19 bars. How long did it take for price action to move from this exact same low, obviously, to where we are right now? It took 21 days. So 5 days to come down, 21 days to go up. Ask yourself the question, which side are people more decisive in making decisions? Because the market only goes up or down because people are making decisions. So obviously we can see price action went down a lot faster than it's going up. So the momentum is in this case still downside momentum. And the closer we get to this resistance, obviously the more I want to be a seller. So this POI that I've got over here, obviously we've isolated that POI on a much smaller time frame. I'm not sure. I don't remember whether it's a 1 hour or 15-minute. We'll just see as we drop down. Okay, it looks like it's a 15-minute POI, but even on a 1 hour, you guys can see some sort of a bearish engulfing. Okay, not on a 1 hour, you can't see it there. But anyway, on a 4 hour, I don't like to drop down the time frames when we're looking at these or when we're planning our higher time frame biases, because it's not necessary. We don't need that extra detail. We just need the value of what's going on. So nonetheless, if we were to just expand this overall POI that we're looking at, we're just looking at this hammer candlestick over here as a POI. And once price action is obviously inside of this hammer, then we are looking for price action to terminate and give us some sort of a sell. So if we were to isolate a structure, a corrective structure inside of this somewhat impulsive momentum, here's our corrective structure over here. Obviously, we just isolate whatever extreme highs we have. Let's just do this to be relevant. And then we isolate whatever extreme lows we got. And then all we're waiting for, nice and simple, third touch. At the third touch, we're waiting for a termination of some sort of a chart pattern. And once we get that chart pattern, obviously, we're looking for downside continuation to hopefully fulfill at the 90% rule of this overall corrective structure. Samuel, I'm saying your 90% rule stuff again, man. At least this time you understand exactly what it is. Maybe if we do get the entry from here, guys, let's see if we can actually hold and follow through on this overall trade, because this is the full move that we've been looking for. We weren't expecting price to turn halfway inside of this corrective structure. So we'll see if we can turn the scalp into a day trade into a swing trade. We try and trade in the direction of high time frame momentum. Guys, we've got less than 1 minute. We're 100% done with the analysis. All I want to just say is thank you guys for wasting your guys' time. I'm just joking. Using your guys' time very much wisely, obviously, to prepare with me for the rest of the week. Guys, I'll see you guys in the groups that we've got. Discord server, Telegram channel, wherever we meet up. Cheers.
Bye, guys. You heard me, right?
They heard you. They can still hear you.
Super.
I see you there, man. Thanks,
where's
man.
Where's that one that always puts money? Kunejo. Is he here?
I don't see Kanejo here in the building. I don't see him here, man. But we're looking for Kanejo. We've got beef. We want to solve
big ones.
beef.
Niggas making 200